guys, and welcome to the Different on Purpose podcast. I'm Brittany, and I am joined by the lovely Jenna Ryan.
Hello.
Today we are going to be talking about hypervigilance. There will be some trigger warnings. We will be mentioning sexual assault in today's episode, so if that's something that is going to bother you, you should probably skip this episode, but make sure to come back next week, and we will, be back to talking about some different vulnerable topics.
Yeah. Sounds good. I'm excited to get into our topic today.
Hey, today we're going to be talking about hypervigilance. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically when you have like an elevated awareness and you're constantly like assessing potential threats from around you. And so a lot of times you'll see this in trauma survivors, which I feel like 99% of the population has some sort of trauma. So today we're going to talk about how we deal with hypervigilance, like how we've noticed it in our own lives, and then some methods that we have come up with to kind of like try to counteract some of that. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I have a quick question real quick to kind of start it off. I was thinking about this when you decided what the topic was going to be, and I got to thinking about it. It's like, does anxiety come first and then hypervigilance, or are you hypervigilant and then that increases your anxiety? Like what?
It definitely increases it for sure. And so that's one of the things that I was going to talk about is some of the associations of hypervigilance. So let me see. So basically, some examples of what hypervigilance would be like if you keep checking your surroundings, like when you're out, just being overwhelmed by really, really crowded or like noisy places. Some people experience that. I know for me, a very big one, and we'll talk about this a little later in the episode, but for me, a really big one is always assessing people's like expressions. And then a lot of these things, so hypervigilance is a lot of times associated with people who have like PTSD. That's like the biggest one. And then it basically, you can also see it in things with people who have panic disorder, severe anxiety, even generalized anxiety, and then obviously things like schizophrenia, paranoia, dementia, things like that. So there's a lot of things that are different, like mental illnesses or just different mental disorders that you can see hypervigilance as being a part of. But the biggest one, the very most common one, is PTSD. For sure.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yep. So where do you think, from what you know about hypervigilance? I mean, I know it's not a topic that's talked about a ton. So like, I really didn't even know there was a term for it until like going through some of my self-help books over the last like year or so, just learning like, hey, there's actually a term for this, because I just always thought like I was just super in tune with people's emotions, I guess, but that's not really what it is. It's actually just like a coping mechanism and a response to kind of growing up with like that sort of environment. So from what you know about hypervigilance, like what do you think that, like what symptoms, I guess, of it do you think that you display the most?
So when I was thinking about this, I have always considered myself like empathic, like kind of like you were saying, you just feel very in tune with others' emotions, but really it's just being hypervigilant and you're really trying to just control the situation. So when I was actually thinking about this is, yes, I feel like I'm empathetic to a degree, but a lot of the times I find myself being so aware of the situation and the people that I'm around. And in order for me to feel safe, I don't even know how to explain it. It's not like I'm manipulating the situation when I'm having conversations with people, it's almost like I it's almost like I'm asking like leading questions, or I am basically just trying to gain trust with this person so that they will essentially like me, because I feel like when I am liked, I feel safe and trusted. So I'll say things as far as like, even if I don't believe things, I'll say it just because I'm getting a feeling that they feel that way about something, or they have the same opinion about a certain topic or whatever. I don't know if this is making sense. I feel like I'm explaining
It
this
does.
really poorly, but just kind of controlling conversation is where I see it the most. And I never realized that that was being hypervigilant, because I am very aware of like what they're talking about, and I'm over analyzing what they're saying. And instead of just being present in the conversation and making a connection, I am worried about feeling safe and feeling secure. And essentially like I'm not even present. Like I'm almost like dissociating in a way when I'm having conversations with people, and I'll say things that I don't mean, and I almost become like a different person. Like I'm watching myself outside of myself when I have these engagements, especially with people that I don't really know that well, or I don't feel comfortable with quite yet. But like one way that I do that is I will overshare things, because I know that if I overshare, people might feel a little bit more, they might feel a bit more comfortable oversharing something, and then I can get information and analyze that for myself. And I'll make it kind of seem like I'm oversharing something that's super raw to me, even though it might be something that I've processed and I'm fine with talking about. But it's almost like I make it seem like it's a really hard discussion, when in reality it's like I'm giving them something that's so that they'll give me something so that I can feel like I'm in control. So that's where I kind of see it the most in my life, and didn't even really realize it until you had mentioned the topic of hypervigilance, and I was really like thinking deep about it. Also, another one that I kind of want to talk about a little bit later, because I want to know like how it manifests in your life too. But crime podcasts have effed me up. Like as far as like I feel like women in general are already hypervigilant, but I really had to stop listening to crime podcasts because it was getting to a point where I was like getting scared to leave my house. And anytime I did, I was like going through this mental checklist of like 100 items every time I went somewhere. But yeah, I want to know like kind of how it manifests with you, because I'm interested to know if having kids has increased it for you, or if you think of, like I'm just interested to know.
So yeah, like I understand what you're saying, and what I want to say first is that I think that I had the same thought that all women were this way, but I don't
Yeah,
think that they are. I
you don't
don't
think
think. I
so?
mean, I think that there's a big portion of people in general that do have some sort of like trauma, and so they therefore learn these coping mechanisms and don't realize it. So yeah, I think there's a good bit of population who does have hypervigilance, but I think that honestly, I think there are people out there who can just like go to the store and not worry about all of the people around them. And it's crazy because I'm like, I can't. Like, I'm
Mind blown.
constantly just like with my, especially when I have my kids with me, they're like in the buggy, or like, honestly, um, a very big one for me, a very, very big one for me is crowded places. Like when we go to Disney World or like Six Flags or anywhere that has like a lot of people, I am constantly so overwhelmed with anxiety that like it's so hard for me to function. And so I really, when Everly was like, I don't know, 2 or 3, she was in that very independent stage and she just wanted to walk everywhere. She didn't want to be carried. She didn't want to sit in a stroller. So I invested in like these things on Amazon, and it came in a 2-pack, and I'm glad because now I have a second kid. But they're like these like wrist bands basically, but they're connected. And so I get one, and then she would get one, and they just kind of like Velcro around your wrist. But my, like the parent side, has like a little key attached to it, and it
Yeah.
can lock her side. So somebody couldn't just come up to her and take hers off and then walk away with her.
Okay, that's
Like
interesting.
they, like you have to have the key to be able to like unlock hers. And it wasn't like a lot of people would like judge me when they would see that, but like it gives a lot of like slack. Like she can still walk off,
Yeah.
but without like being able to like walk too far,
Yeah.
and like get into danger. But like those gave me the biggest peace of mind. Like when we would go places like that, because like
Yeah.
she would want to walk and she would want to walk ahead, and they would get uncomfortable, right? Because she would be like pulling my arm and I'd be like walking with my arm in like really weird positions. But it was fine because I'd rather do that than like constantly just be so worried about like
Yeah.
not having an eye on her like 24/7. But also like being places like Disney, like you want to be able to like look around and enjoy like
Yeah.
the magic of the park. But like I felt like I just couldn't do that. Like we would go to like fairs. Like I was never enjoying my environment because I was just always so worried.
Yeah.
I really I have listened to crime podcasts in the past. I tend not to. I do have some saved to my phone because every once in a while I'll get like where I do want to listen to one. But like crime podcasts, sometimes I love to read, but sometimes even like super like detailed thriller books will like kind of send me into like a little bit of like high anxiety.
Yeah.
But definitely like horror movies. I had to stop watching horror movies like probably after high school. Like
Yeah.
I remember it used to be like the thing to do. Like you would go watch a horror movie like on a date, and then like obviously you'd be scared and you'd be like wanting to snuggle up to your guy or whatever and like be protected. But now like if anybody's like, oh, did you see that new, I'm like, I didn't even watch the preview. Like
No, I can't either. Yeah.
I don't even watch the preview. I don't look at the commercials when they come on, like none of it, because it gives me so much anxiety. But I think the other than the crowded areas, I think that the biggest one for me is reading people's expressions. That's definitely like my biggest issue with like the hypervigilant side. And I think it really comes from I've been like diving into this for like I said, like the last year since I kind of learned what this topic was. For me, the biggest thing that I can think is that I grew up and my mom's emotional state sometimes was just very hit or miss. Like I don't know if it's that she had like a really stressful day or what the situation was, but she like sometimes she would come home and like she would be like in a really great mood, and then sometimes she would come home and she would be like very on edge, and like if I did the smallest thing, like she would just kind of like yell at me, and kind of so that inconsistency and like I guess what I've learned the technical term is having like an emotionally unstable parent. For the most part, like because you know I had my dad as well, but I didn't see him nearly as often as you know I lived with my mom.
Yeah.
So having that instability just kind of kept me on edge, I guess, a lot as a child. So learning to read people's expressions kind of like how I coped, I guess. So like even now, like I will be talking to Colby and like his facial expression will change, and I'll be like, what's wrong? And he'll be like, nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, something's wrong with you. Like I feel like I can just literally feel it in my body. And a lot of times, more often than not, it's me convincing myself that there's something wrong when there's really not, because like their facial expression will change just a little bit. And it's basically like my body sensing danger is about to come, even though like my husband has never indicated any sort of like, you know, anger or violence or anything. Like it's just how I learned to cope like as a child and just in other relationships and other situations, that now I have this like what is the word? Like I'm not like self-aware that like I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Like I just have this natural subconsciously. Like I'm just not even realizing that I'm doing it. Like I just feel like my body will just feel endangered by someone's facial expression like slightly changing, and then I'm just constantly like on defense, like, and they're like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like,
yeah.
you know?
You're the one who made me this way.
Yeah. So that's a very, very big one for me.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who are like that, and a lot of people have said what you said, like they think they're empaths. I've never in my life thought that I was an empath. I feel like I can be very empathetic, but I never thought like I have people that I know that are like, I can literally, like, if you're sad, I can feel it. And like, then
Yeah.
my entire body becomes overwhelmed with sadness. And I'm like, I don't understand that. But basically, like, more often than not, I'm not saying empaths isn't like a real thing, but more often than not, those people really just learned those coping mechanisms
Yeah.
growing up. They learn to like absorb other people's emotions as a way to cope.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know whether or not they can literally feel it, or if it's just their brain tricking them into thinking they feel the way this person feels. I don't really know the science behind how that works, but I do know that like a lot of like stuff I've read talks about, you know, people thinking they're just that they're empaths, but it's really just this hypervigilance, their body sensing, hey, something's shifted in this person's mood or behavior. Now something needs to shift within you so that you're protected, I guess. And
I would
so
agree
that's
with
like,
that.
yeah, that's a big thing. Like, I've noticed a lot of people are like, oh, I'm an empath. And then I'm like, sometimes it's crazy to me too that people will like talk about it as though it's a good thing. And I guess it can be, you know, like, you know, if you're around a lot of happy people, then maybe you're just really happy all the time. I don't know. But it's crazy to me that people don't make that connection with like, I am this way because I grew up having to cope with something that's not normal.
Yeah.
And so,
I think
I don't know. I find that just like really interesting, I guess.
I think so too. And I think there's a lot less empaths because I didn't make the connection until I actually sat and thought about it. Because I've always, and I think I know I'm literally going to say like, there's a lot less empaths in the world than I think. There's a lot less people who are pathetic than like claim to be, I guess. But I really think that I do have a lot of empathy. I think I am an empathetic person. I don't necessarily like want to claim myself as an empath, but I think a lot of it is hypervigilance. But I can tell the difference, I guess, if this makes sense. So kind of like last night, this is a perfect example of this. I feel like this was a very empathetic moment, and it wasn't like me being hypervigilant at all. It was, I saw something very incredibly sad, and it touched me so deeply that I felt that sadness tangibly. I was feeling my heart break for these people that I didn't even know. And that'll happen to me every now and then. And it kept me up all night, like completely all night. Like I was heartbroken as if it had happened to me. And very rarely does that kind of sadness or that kind of feeling and emotion happen. A lot of the times it is hypervigilance, but I can definitely tell the difference. But before I thought about it, I was like, oh, I'm just empathetic. Like I'm not being super high. I'm not being hypervigilant. I'm not thinking too much of this. You know, I was just like getting the feeling. But now that I think about it, I can definitely tell the difference whether it's like an empathic moment or if it's just me creating that emotion based off of like a response, you know?
Yeah. And I
It
think
is
that
very
that's the thing.
interesting.
It's like, I'm not saying that people like that the feelings aren't real. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's definitely not what I meant. What I meant is that those feelings come because your body is sensing
Yeah.
a shift. Like you shift, like for instance, you're looking at this sad video or whatever, and you sense that person's emotions shift, and even sometimes it's not visible. Like even if they're not crying, like you can see someone get frustrated.
Yeah.
And instantly your body language will shift and change to protect yourself, but also to like sometimes like feel what those people are feeling, you know, like, because I know there are instances where like somebody will like wrong my kids or my husband, and I will have that same thing, like their emotions will shift when they're telling me about it, and so therefore like my emotions then will shift, and then I'll also start to feel wronged even though nobody did anything to me, you know what I'm saying? So I think that the emotion side is very real. I just think that it's interesting and that's where like the hypervigilant part comes in, is that you're just hyper aware of shifts in other people's emotions. And not everybody is like that. And it's weird when you are like that, because you're like, what do you mean? Like, because I know, like, there have been plenty of times where, like, my husband and I have been out. I'm sorry, I feel like I sound really stuffy in this moment. But my husband and I will be out, and like we'll be talking to some of his friends, or we'll be, you know, at his parents' house or something, and then like we'll leave and I'm like, I can't believe like they reacted that way or something, and he will
Yeah.
have no idea what I'm talking about. And I'm like they just got so irritated, and he's like, what are you talking about? He was like,
Yeah.
nobody was irritated. And I'm like, they were definitely irritated, because
Yeah.
I'm so hyper aware of those shifts in people's like emotions or expressions. And I guess people who don't like never learn to cope that way are not hyper aware of it. And then therefore they don't notice those slight like changes that make you aware of somebody being slightly frustrated
Yeah.
or irritated about something.
And it
And
could be the
so,
smallest shift, like
mm-hmm,
the smallest shift, like just like a tiny movement in the eyebrow or like whatever it may be. It's so small. I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
yeah. And so sometimes like he'll like not intentionally, but like sometimes he'll make me think that I'm crazy. I'm like, was I just imagining that? But then also there are times that I know that like I will see a small shift and I will assume they're frustrated, and they may
Yeah.
not be.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just had an eyebrow twitch or something. I don't know. So like,
That's what's annoying too, because I feel like when you have, like, when you are this way, it's how do you listen to your gut? How do you listen to your
mm-hmm,
intuition? You know, you can't tell the difference a lot of the times. And I find that really, that's something that annoys me the most about it is I'd like to think that I had a really good, have a good intuition. And I think naturally women just have a stronger intuition. And I think even like when you have children, your intuition's just a little bit stronger. But the thing with like anxiety and the hypervigilance is I can't tell if it's a gut feeling or if I can't tell if it's just me like creating this. A lot of it has to, that's why I had to stop listening to the crime podcast because I was creating these scenarios in my head. Like, honestly, it would happen anytime I would see a man. Like, if I saw a man and he was like, gave me any like slightest creepy vibe, I'm like, he is out to get me. He's going to kill me. And I would convince myself of it. And I'm like, how am I going to decipher when I'm in actual danger? Because I feel like I'm in danger every time I go somewhere, you know?
I know it's very frustrating. I
Yeah.
know that like, so I know that you know this, but our listeners don't know this yet. I know that we will get into this, I'm sure, throughout this, but I'm a sexual assault survivor. And so that makes me being so, like, I'm so hyper aware of, like, that. Like, that's my biggest fear is, like, something happening to my kids, like, that I'm not aware of or something. And so for me, I'm that way with, like, super small stuff. Like I've
Yeah.
gone through, like when I was in college, I did a program where I got certified in like, because I was going to school initially to be a teacher. I went through this certification process of getting certified for noticing like symptoms of sexual assault. So like if you had students who were being abused, you could like tell the signs and all this stuff. And so I learned a lot about grooming and this and that. And like, that was never something I knew about growing up. But now I'm very hyper aware of it. And so my biggest fear is like that happening to my kids. So like anytime that like any male figure in my kids' lives, because most of the time sexual assault, like I'm not saying there can't be like random rapes or whatever, but
Yeah.
most of the time it's somebody that you know.
Yeah.
And so for me with my daughter, like anytime a male figure in her life is like trying to go like over and beyond and do something nice for her, like all of these red flags start going off in my
Yeah.
brain. And I can't just accept that people want to be nice and just
Yeah.
like spoil her or
Yeah.
like whatever. And so that's like a big problem for me. But I also feel the same way like when I go out to grocery stores or whatever, like if I see somebody more than like one time in a grocery store, I'm like, this person's
Yeah.
following me.
Oh yeah,
Like this
100%.
person's gonna try to snatch my daughter out of the buggy. Like she's
Yeah.
not like not 9, she's 8, but she is big, and she'll take up a whole buggy by herself. And I'm like, girl, you're just gonna have to let me pile this stuff on top of you. You are sitting in this buggy. Like you can sit here and you can watch videos on my phone or your tablet. Like you're gonna sit in this buggy because I cannot like shop and like look
Yeah.
for the things I need to put into the buggy, but also like constantly keep an eye over to the side to
Yeah.
like make sure that nobody is like following you. And so
Yeah.
Um, I am so overly aware of like my surroundings and situations and my interactions with people and my kids' interactions with people, and that's a very big like thing for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have to like kind of limit my crime podcasts and
Yeah.
the things that are going to make that worse, because it's naturally just already
Yeah.
really like high up there for me.
Yeah.
But what I found really interesting with this whole topic was that there are, like with any um, mental like situation, I guess, there are so many side effects. I know we talked about this, I think, in one of the earlier podcasts, um, but I have been looking or like studying a lot into like holistic,
Mm-hmm.
like psychology and that sort of stuff. And I think it's incredibly interesting the connection that like your mind and your body, and then obviously the spirit is like the third part of that, but like
Mm-hmm.
the connection that they can all have. And so with this hypervigilance, you can exhibit like physical symptoms as well as like mental symptoms.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're
I
okay.
thought I was really well over this sickness, but the stuffy keeps coming back out. So like some of the physical symptoms that I noticed were common in some of the stuff that I was reading about hypervigilance was like sometimes like you can get so overwhelmed in some of these situations, like you'll break out in like sweating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your heart racing is a really big one.
Yeah.
It can cause like fast or really like shallow breathing, like
Mm-hmm.
you know, kind of like if you're gonna like have a panic attack
Yeah.
because you get so like worked up, like you just start
Yeah.
exhibiting all these physical symptoms, and like it's really just all because of your brain, you
Yeah.
know. And that's what's crazy to me is like you can be in like absolutely no danger, but if your brain is convincing you that you're in danger, like you go into that like fight or flight, and your body
Mm-hmm.
just starts like panicking. um and some
It's
of the
awful.
like behavioral symptoms that can come from that is like you just have like heightened fear, heightened anxiety. You can go into like I said, like an actual panic. And I just thought like that's crazy. Like
Yeah.
do you notice, I know that like in certain situations at the grocery store or whatever, like my heart rate, like I can always tell, like it'll go up
Yeah.
for sure. But like have you ever gotten in like a situation where you like physically like sweat and you're
Oh, girl,
like
yes. Oh, yeah.
so
So the first time that I think I had like a panic attack, like what you're describing, it was the physical symptoms were so intense. It was when I'm pretty sure it was like during COVID, and it was the week that they had basically shut everything down. And I got super nervous. So I was like, I need to go to Walmart and make sure that we have enough food just in case. Like I started just like, okay, I just need to prepare. We didn't have anything at the house. So I went into Walmart, and I remember walking in, and one, it was super crowded, and there was nothing on the shelves, like absolutely nothing on the shelves. There were people walking around in hazmat suits. Like it was just, it was surreal. And I can remember starting to get like really dizzy, like really, really dizzy. Like I was gonna pass out, and I was like, well, I haven't eaten anything. Like I was trying to like talk myself out of it. And then I had this boy like try to take my purse in this whole situation. So that made it even worse. And he was a young kid. I don't know why he was trying to steal my purse or whatever, but I was going in like the freezer section and went to go grab something. And as soon as I turned around, I saw him try to grab it. And I was like, what are you doing? And he threw it back down. He didn't take it, but he ran off. And in that moment, like that's when the panic started. My heart started racing. My fingers and palms got so sweaty that like I couldn't even grip on to the cart anymore. I tried to like get my phone, and my hands were shaking so bad that I couldn't even grab my phone. The dizziness got worse. Like I just felt weak, and I was like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. Legit thought I was having a heart attack. And I left the store. I don't know how I was able to drive myself home, but I was able to drive myself home. And at this point, we had lived on the third floor of our apartment. And I think because I was already panicking, me walking up those stairs, and I did it really quickly, and I don't think I was breathing very well, my heart started thumping, and I was like, yep, this is it. I'm having a heart attack. And I ended up going to the emergency room. I've literally gone to the emergency room for these physical symptoms like 3 times now, because I'm so convinced that something is wrong, that I am having a heart attack. There was one time, and everything was fine with my heart. There was one time the physical symptoms were so bad that my blood pressure was super high. And like as soon as they gave me the anxiety medication, it was fine. Everything went down. But yeah, I have 100% experienced this. And ever since taking medicine, I'll get the feeling a little bit, but it definitely is very muted and I'm able to kind of like talk myself back out of it. Medicine has saved me because for a while there, I was panicking every day. I was having a panic attack every single day. And part of it was once it had happened, I had associated all of these different things with fear and was picking apart every single time I would go into a Walmart. Like I barely go into Walmart now because I still get the same feeling. And coffee was one of them. There was one time I had a coffee and it happened. And like for a really long time, I couldn't even drink coffee, even decaf. Like even the smell of it would bring those memories back. And yeah, it just was really bad. I forgot where I was going with this, but yeah, there was a point in time where I was having these physical symptoms every single day and it just increased my fear. So every single time I'd leave the house, there would be this mental checklist that I would have to go through, almost like a rumination type thing, like people with OCD experience, where you're constantly having to think back in this loop in order to feel safe. And that's what I was having to do. Anytime I'd go anywhere, I was so hyper aware of everything that was going on that I almost like would start feeling numb or like spacey, I guess. But yeah, I definitely know those feelings. They're not fun at all. The physical symptoms are probably one of the hardest things to get over because once you feel those symptoms, you get scared of them. And it's almost like you start to panic and fear the panic attack and the fear. And it just becomes this loop. And the only way that I found to really help it was one, getting on medication, but two, like sitting in the fear and sitting in the panic allows it to pass a lot more quickly because I would fight it a lot of the times. But yeah, the physical symptoms are no joke. No joke. I literally, there's been 3 times that I've gone to the ER, convinced I was dying, having a heart attack.
Yeah. I've gone to the emergency. I think it was only once, because of, my chest just feeling like it was like tight. It was going to explode. But yeah, that's basically what they said. It's like you're just having a panic attack. Yeah. I don't remember what caused it specifically, but since then, sorry,
we're filming in the morning today, guys.
I know, and
look at
I'm
us.
still tired. So yeah, since having like that one big episode where I went to the emergency room, when I sense those, like, I'm just like, okay, I think I'm just having a panic attack, like, and then I'll go through my learned like coping mechanisms or whatever to like deal with it. But my nose is bothering me. So
you can go blow it. You want to take a break and go blow it?
No, it's okay.
Okay, sorry.
I don't want to. Yeah. But yeah, so a lot of treatments that they say for like some of these behavioral symptoms or physical symptoms that you experience, a lot of treatments that can help with those, and then just hypervigilance in general. Obviously, like the biggest one is therapy, because like I said, the most common like situations that you see hypervigilance in is like PTSD. Man, I haven't had any coffee. So therapy is a big, thing to help people who have like really severe like hypervigilance, and like, it may affect their, day to day. I'm not currently in therapy. I am setting up to go back, but I know that I don't think that my hypervigilance necessarily like paralyzes me, I guess, but I think that for sure, like, there are some situations in which like people can just become so overwhelmed by it that they like have a really hard time interacting with people. So I think, yeah, definitely in situations like that, therapy would help. I know you said medication helps. I'm not on an anxiety medication anymore. I was initially on a medication to treating both my anxiety and depression. But the side effects of it were, it was causing me like other health issues. So I had to switch from that and switch to a different medication that now only treats my depression. So they did say that they could put me on a separate, a separate anxiety medication. But I don't have like anxiety attacks or things like that as
Yeah.
frequently. So I haven't gotten back on a medication for that, but that did help a lot when I was on one.
Yeah.
And then I know for me personally, a lot of other coping mechanisms that I've learned to help with like these hypervigilant situations that I sometimes, find myself in. Setting boundaries is a big one. I know that I've had to set certain boundaries with like different friends or like even family, like because there will be a lot of times where just their personalities sometimes will it'll cause me to feel that like threat, I guess, just because like they may be a little, emotionally unstable, and that threatened sorry that threatened feeling that I get, I just sometimes I'll have to like, kind of not interact with them as much as like maybe I used to or something like that. It's never been like super like people that I'm super close to, so it's never been like a huge it's never had a huge effect on me. But other than that, sometimes like if I'm having like what I feel is like a panic attack or something, I take like a lot of, slow, deep breaths. I do implement
Breathing
a lot of
helps
like
so
grounding techniques. Grounding is like a big thing if I'm like my heart is racing and I'm starting to feel like lightheaded or like those like my anxiety gets really, really high. I'll just be like, okay, like, that bag is purple and this is that. Like I will bring myself back down to reality and like just start naming things around me. So grounding techniques are have been really helpful in that. So sometimes in situations like for me feeling like somebody's maybe upset, like if I'm reading people's emotions and I'm like, they were really upset with me because I did something. Because that's my other part of that is like, I feel like when I see a shift in somebody's emotions, I immediately start blaming myself too. Like, I'll be like, what did I do to upset them? What did I do to offend them? What did So sometimes I will start taking it very personal that somebody's like irritated or upset or whatever shift I assume is, in their emotions. And so I think a big thing with that is trying to find evidence, I guess, not like Sherlock Holmes style, but like, just like really digging into my brain and being like, did you actually do anything to like upset them? So kind of like looking for that evidence before I let myself overreact. And then also within that same thing, just constantly reminding myself, like, at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for other people's feelings. Like, that's a huge thing that I really struggle with. Is just constantly reminding myself, like, I'm not. So, like, even if we're doing something, like, if I purposely, like, say, hey, Jenna, like, your hair looks really terrible, like, that is me purposely doing something to upset you. And then, yes, like, I am responsible for that. But if I'm just, like, talking and I'm, like, being myself and I just naturally do something that's not really offensive, but it somehow offends you, like, I'm not responsible for that. Or I'm not responsible, like, if I'm trying to set a boundary and it upsets you because, like, or not just you, but, like, anybody, if it upsets that person because they don't want to, like, face the reality of what they're doing or something, like, if I'm like, hey, you saying this sort of stuff, like you had talked about in a previous podcast, like being around people who just negatively talk about their body or their image.
Yeah.
That's something that you don't like to be around or listen to. So if you try to set that boundary and say, hey, I don't want to talk about this with you, and they can't respect that and they get offended because you're trying to set that boundary, like, that's not something that you're responsible for, like they're them getting upset about it. So that's something that I constantly just have to remind myself about, and then just working on my self-talk. That's my big thing is just not convincing myself, because I'll leave a lot of situations and I'm like, man, I honestly, if I'm being 100% transparent with you, I did this. It wasn't just in my head. I said it out loud to Colby, but when we had dinner in Colorado, I left and I was like, oh my gosh, I talked so much.
Oh,
Like,
no, you.
they probably thought this, this, and this. And I was just saying, like, all these things to me. I was like, they were probably so, like, offended, or not like offended, but just like, I don't know. I was just like, I don't feel like I let them talk at all. And so
I did not
I
feel
was
that
just
way at
very,
all.
like, hard on myself
Mm-hmm.
about that whole situation. And so I would do that a lot. Like, leave
Yeah.
situations and be like, I upset them because of this, this, and this. And I just start to mentally spiral.
Yeah.
Other than those things, do you have any other, like, things that you will do to kind of, like, work out of your hypervigilant, like, states, I guess?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying as far as like not being responsible. So, if it's a situation where I feel like I've annoyed somebody or somebody doesn't like me or I've said something that bothers somebody, what I've had to tell myself is if it bothered them enough, they would tell me. Like, and if they don't say anything, I have to ignore it. Like, I have to ignore it. I can't let myself even reach out to try to secretly mend. You know what I mean? Like, you know how if you feel like you've upset somebody, but the elephant's in the room, you haven't talked about it, you'll like kind of text them and just try to like get some sort of confirmation that they're not mad at you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or even sometimes, like, I'll apologize without them even having said that I upset them. Like, for
Yeah,
instance, with the
exactly.
whole dinner thing, like, I might have, like, texted him and, like, I'm so sorry I was talking the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
that's not something I really needed to apologize for.
No,
It's
not at all.
just, like, if you've convinced yourself that somebody's offended, like, sometimes you'll just text them and be like,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry I did this. And they'll be like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about? you
Yeah.
know?
I've had to tell myself like if they don't say anything directly to me about it, then I have to let it go. Like I've just got to let it go, and if it hurt them enough, they'll say something, even if they're like passive aggressive or whatever. Like if you don't say anything to me directly about it, I'm just everything's fine, and I'm going to continue on as if everything is fine. It's really hard at first, and sometimes it's still kind of hard, but I'm just like it could be anything else other than me, And I've also had to tell myself is like, not everything is about you, Jenna, because that also helps because not that I'm making it about me, but I'm just kind of like Dion actually says this sometimes because I'm the same way. I'm very hyper vigilant of his emotional shifts, and I'll ask him what's wrong or what's going on or what did I do, and he goes, I'm just upset. Like you didn't do anything. It's not always about you necessarily. I'm just upset, and that's okay. You didn't do anything. And I had to like tell myself that like, okay, like people can be upset and interact with me, and it's not because of me. There are
Yeah.
lots of other
Me and
reasons.
Colby will
So
go through that too.
yeah,
Like,
that's
if I sense that he's, like, slightly upset, like, it could totally be about work or something that happened at work, and I immediately, like, will blame myself. I'm like, what did I do? What did I do to upset you? Like, he's just like,
100%.
you literally haven't done anything. I'm like, but you're upset. And
Yeah,
you initially were not upset when you got home, and then now you're upset. So it had to have been something that I did. And then he's
yeah,
like, no, like, I saw a work email come across, and it, like, really
yeah,
made me mad. And I'm like, and I don't notice those things. Like, I don't notice him, like, look at his phone and check a work email even after he's home or
yeah,
whatever. But, like, sometimes it'll be, like, a text from his boss after hours, and I'm like,
yeah,
it has nothing to do with me, but I automatically assume because he is with me in the moment that he becomes upset that it is something that I did.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, that's a big one that I do, and that helps. That helps with that situation. I will say, like, I love crime podcasts, okay? I love them. I love all things true crime, and sometimes I'll still watch them. And I have to really be, like, I used to listen to them on repeat. Like, I would just have them playing, like, when I was working, or I would have YouTube. Like, Kendall Ray, I love watching her YouTube videos. She does a lot of true crime stuff. I've always really enjoyed listening to it, but I've had to cut it down, like, completely. Like I have to really like ask myself a lot of questions if I'm going to listen to something true crime because that makes it 10 times worse. Like I get to a point where I won't even leave my house because I'm scared. So when the Idaho murders happened, like, and all of the stuff started coming out about it, I got deep. Like when the affidavit came out, I should not have read that. Like I definitely broke a boundary with myself. I was like, I know that this is going to upset me and make me scared. And it did. Excuse me. And I was
Which
home by
one?
my.
I'm sorry. Which one was that? Was that the one? Was that recent? Like where the one with the girls? Something about like
Yeah, they
I
were.
didn't really look too much into it, but There was like
It,
some girls, and like there was like a downstairs and like an upstairs,
yeah,
and
it's that one. There was
yeah, I
4
just read like
victims.
a little bit into that, and then I was like,
Yeah,
I'm not going down this rabbit hole. I
it's
got
really
really
intense.
invested in the Gabby Petito case. I
Me
got
too.
really invested in that,
Me too.
and I was panicking. And I was really
It was
panicking
bad.
because like I know Ashton went on they like went to
Yeah.
whatever national park that was, like
Yep.
around that same time, and I was like, girl, he's still out there.
Yep.
I
Yep.
was so paranoid that whole time. But granted, I mean, he actually wasn't, because he was actually
Yeah.
dead. But
Yeah.
you know, the whole time I was just like, and then like it was also partially in Florida because like my parents live in Florida, and so
Yeah.
the whole time I was just super. I'm not even close to where like that happened.
Yeah.
But I was just like,
I was super invested in that too. It's really sad. And like stuff like that, it gets to me. Like, and it'll get to a point where I'll start to convince myself, like Dion has never done anything to make me believe this, but I'll start convincing myself like, what if Dion kills me one day? Like, that's why I just can't. Like, I can't listen to stuff like that because it starts to become truth for me, and I start picking up on things that are just like not there. Also, another one is if I am going out by myself, I really try not to do it at night because that's when things get really, really like tough for me mentally. And I'm always vigilant, even in the daytime, but I really try to avoid going places at nighttime if I can. Like there have been a few times that I've gone to like Target or TJ Maxx at night and I've been fine. I am on more of a high alert, especially going through the parking lot and stuff, which is normal, you know, but I really try to avoid being by myself at night if I can. And I don't know if that's me avoiding like handling being scared or if it's just something I'm doing for my mental, but it seems to work. And I don't know, I just feel safer if I am just doing things during the day versus at nighttime. So that's really helped. And then also just like therapy and breathing, and a big thing that I always tell myself, because I'm always thinking of like things that could go wrong in the future, always. And the thing my therapist told me to tell myself is like, literally, if you have to, take it second by second. Like, tell yourself, in the second, am I safe? Yes. In this second, am I safe? Yes. And if you have to do it literally second by second, do that. Like, I am safe in this second. I am safe in this second. I am safe here. And then gradually increase it to this minute I'm safe. Because like one of my big things that I'm super hyper vigilant about is like death. So anything in my body that feels off, or if I read too much into what I think are signs, I guess, that somebody in my family or somebody I love is going to pass, which is like kind of, it's insane. But I always have to tell myself like someday, but not today. Like, you know, or someday or not right now. And just basically bringing myself back to the present moment really, really helps from the spiral too. But then there's also the thing is like, I do keep myself safe. So I'll never not be vigilant, but I really want to try to get over like being so hyper vigilant all the time because one, like your body can't function in that state all the time. Like there will be eventually a time where like I'm just going to break and I'm just going to be tired. And I see that kind of happen sometimes, but
I've seen stories of people who they don't come out and say like, oh, they were super hyper vigilant, so this is why this happened. Because like I said, I think that hypervigilance is something that's not talked about quite nearly enough. It's just kind of, I feel like it's kind of wrapped into like anxiety. People just label it anxiety, and it does heighten your anxiety for sure, but it's a separate thing all on its own.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes people can be like, you know, they get so scared and so wrapped up in their hypervigilance that they become so hyper aware of everything around them all the time that they start to panic and live in this state of anxiety and fear. And then they start doing things like, you know, carrying like a concealed weapon or whatever. Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's wrong by any means. I'm just saying that sometimes people will go to those measures because they're just so scared of every single thing around them. And they live in this state of fear of something happening to them. And, you know, you can hear stories of people who just, like, kind of more or less, like, snap. And, like, they may end up just, like, shooting somebody who maybe was looking at them wrong. And like,
Yeah.
you're just like, why on earth would somebody do that?
Yeah.
And I really think that sometimes it's just things like this. Like, they were just so hyper aware of like everything, and they didn't learn how to like manage it or cope with it. Because I mean, hypervigilance as in and of itself is a coping mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
that you just learn, from, living in or experiencing some sort of traumas. But I think that, some people just, it spirals. Like, it's just, you never know what it is, and so you never learn how to like deal with it, and then you never learn how to like cope better, I guess, is the
Mm-hmm.
sense. So like, not cope with your hypervigilance, but just learn that your hypervigilance doesn't need to be your coping mechanism. Like, you can learn to
Yeah.
cope in other ways with the issues. And so learning how to cope better, and then like, if you never learn that, like, I can easily see how it can just cause you to just live in a constant panic and live in like constant fear or
Yeah.
agitation or however that manifests itself, and then you just snap.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. That's part of the reason why it makes me nervous. Because when it was at its highest, for me, I was telling Dion, like, I kind of want to get a conceal and carry so that I just feel safe if I'm by myself. And like thinking about it, I'm like, to be honest, like I am not in the headspace to be carrying around like a gun because it was almost to the point where, like you said, somebody would just look at me wrong and it would almost be like paranoia. I would just be like, they're following me and they're going to kidnap me and I've got to make sure that they don't. And I would just get into like a spiral of almost paranoia. And it would really just be nothing. There were several times I convinced myself cars were following me, even though they just lived in the same neighborhood as me. I would literally like circle around my neighborhood several times if I thought that. So people didn't know like where I was living if they were following me. It was just, I would do the weirdest stuff to try to keep myself safe. And I was like, if I'm doing this, I definitely don't need to have a weapon with me, even though it would make me feel safe. I do have pepper spray, and I do have like bear spray in my car and stuff just in case, but that helped a little bit. But I was like, I'm not in the headspace to be carrying around a gun, I think. Not that I
Yeah.
would necessarily do anything, but I was so scared that it just wasn't smart, I think. I just think it wasn't
Yeah.
smart for me.
There's a fine line, because I'm not saying that there's not like situations in life. Like, there are just people out there who kind of go cuckoo bananas and just,
Yeah.
like, sometimes it is safer to just have a weapon on you and, whatever. But, um, I'm not saying there's not situations like that. And I think that I would like to eventually get to a place where I feel like I'm stable enough to carry a weapon.
Yeah.
But I mean, my husband has one. Obviously, like, I mean, even if he didn't, I feel like I naturally just feel safer when I'm with him.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah. I
just
get
being
that.
out by myself, it's definitely hard a lot of times. Like, just finding that like middle ground of
Yeah.
like, you know, if somebody broke into my house, like, if my husband wasn't here or something, like, it would like, his weapon wasn't here, like,
Yeah.
what do I do? But then I'm like, well, like, I have an alarm system. I don't, like, the cops would be on their way. And then aside from that, like, I got some pretty big kitchen knives. I don't know, like,
Yeah. I
if I
got
really
stuff.
needed something. But I don't, um, I don't know. I feel the same way. Like, I don't know that I'm at a point where, like, I don't really know how to shoot. I know, like, people are like, oh, just aim and shoot. But I want to learn how to, like, actually shoot a weapon if I'm going
Yeah.
to, like, carry one. So
You need to be
first, I need to
comfortable
go
with
through
it.
that whole process. But second, like, I don't know, um, headspace wise. Like, I don't know. Even if I was in a situation where I really felt like I needed to use it, I also feel like I would go into, like, so there's actually like three stages. I know it's always called like fight or flight, but there's also like a freeze, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like, I would just freeze, and
Yeah.
I would just, yeah, you can steal all my stuff. I don't. It's all replaceable, like, to me, like,
Yeah.
so I don't know. Um, I don't know. I think that I think that they are good. I think that they're good for actual protection purposes. I think that some people can take it a little too far. I think that, there's a happy ground to be found. I just don't think that I'm there, um, and so I don't have one. But
Yeah. I
um,
do be having my pepper spray though.
Yeah, I don't have
And I
pepper
keep it
spray
with
either.
me.
I need to get some for real.
You need to get
But
some.
um, yeah, I don't know. I think that like I said, I think there are definitely some crazies out there sometimes that are looking to hurt people and are looking to whatever. But I don't think it's as severe as we convince ourselves sometimes. Like
Yeah.
you said, like you have people who you think will be following you into your neighborhood, and I do that all
Yeah.
the time. And then like I will be like, if they turn down this road, I'm not going into my house.
A
But then
hundred
they'll end up
percent.
turning into their driveway like before that, and I'm like, oh, it's so
Yeah.
stupid. They
I
live
know.
here. It's a big
I,
neighborhood. Like
I do the same thing. I do the same
yeah,
thing. A lot of
like
it
because I'll
too, I
be
feel
like, they've
like,
been following me for the last 10 minutes, and I'm like, they were also coming the same.
yeah,
They're coming to the same place
they're coming to the same place.
technically.
That's why.
So
That's why.
yeah,
But you never know. Like,
I
and I
know.
think the abundance of information that we have access to does not help at all because there's
Mm-mm.
always stories about all these crazy things that are happening all the time. And like for a while, my like TikTok for you page was just about like trafficking scams, all of this stuff. And I feel like the abundance of information also doesn't help at all. So I try to like, I really try to stay away with it. If I see something along the lines, it interests you at first because it almost feels like, oh, like this is going to make me safe. I need to know how to do this. And a lot of the times I just have to keep scrolling. Like I'm like, I can't think about this right now. I've got to just not.
Yeah, I think that's important though, like being able to set those boundaries because like, it's really not benefiting you.
Yeah.
You think that it will, but then like you now know yourself well enough to be like, this is not going to benefit me. But it's hard.
Yeah.
Like I watch a lot like of reruns of Law and Order SVU, and being like an assault victim, like I just
Yeah.
know that I'm already super hyper aware of things happening.
Yeah.
But I do find the show like interesting. I
Yeah.
do slightly find um like I don't want to say joy because I know the show is not actually real. Like,
Yeah.
the people in the show. Like, but I do find like small bits of like closure or like whatever when I see the people caught and like,
Yeah.
punished for what they did. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why. But I do
Justice.
like, yeah, but like things like true crime and stuff like that, like where the person's never been found or the person's still out, like that stuff, like just, sends me
It bothers
like,
me too.
yeah. So, I think this was a really good topic. I think that it's good to make people aware of this. I don't I don't think it's something that's talked about enough. Like I said previously, I think that for me it helped knowing that there was a term, I guess,
Yeah.
for it. Like it helped knowing that like, hey, I'm not just crazy. I'm not just reading into people's emotions. And I guess knowing that there was a term then caused me to look into it and then caused me to kind of do the work backwards to figure out like, hey, where did this come from? Why do I do this?
Yeah.
So I think that was really beneficial for me. And then I hope that, us having these discussions about it today can help people like be like, oh man, like that's me. I
Yeah.
deal with that. And maybe I should kind of look more into why I do that.
Yeah.
Because I think that was really beneficial for me to kind of understand where that came from. And then, like I said, figure out better ways to cope with
Yeah.
the reactions that I was having.
Oh
'Cause
yeah.
obviously I haven't been able to especially mine. I think a lot of mine does come from PTSD. And so I think that's not something that you can just make go away. I think it's just something you have to learn to like tell yourself like this is not actually happening the way that I'm convincing myself it's happening. Like this
Yeah.
is not reality, and then just like figuring out ways to bring yourself back to reality. And like you said, just convincing yourself like even if I did something that upset them, like I'm not responsible for
Yeah.
their feelings 100% of the time. I'm not responsible for making them, like you said, like making them admit that they're upset, or if they
Yeah.
don't want to talk about it, then we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes like I will try to force conversations out of people, and there's not really even a conversation to be had.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it just makes it a little bit worse. So
All in the name of growth, you know? All in the name of growth. My goal in life is just to be a really calm woman And yeah, I just want to be calm. I want to be calm, but also vigilant and smart. But yeah, that's definitely one of those things that it's definitely improved a lot, but there's still room. There's still room for improvement. And if it'll ever go away, I don't know, but at least I'm aware of it, and I think that's the first step is just becoming aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, make sure you guys join us next week for our next topic.